Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Radio Dayz, a podcast radio program that delves into the world of terrestrial radio. It's DJs and on-air personality, and you, all fans of radio as a medium. Here's your host, Ron.
Hello and welcome to Radio Dayz The Podcast. You can hear this podcast on Buzzsprout, as well as all other major podcast platforms like Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. You can also watch this podcast via YouTube and at ronrobinsonstudios.com. And this episode's, it's tongue-tied this morning. In this episode, which is brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group and Radio Dayz the Movie, we're going to be taking a dive into the radio and television broadcasting career of a Detroit luminary. Very excited about this week's show. She's been heard on WNIC and WJR in Detroit. On the TV side, she's been seen on Fox 2, and a lot of people don't know this, but she was an on-air meteorologist on the Weather Channel. Did I mention she's a graduate of Northern Arizona University? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incomparable Kam Carman. Kam, how are you today?
I'm good, Ron. Thank you so much. You know, I've never been called a luminary. I appreciate that.
I think you're a luminary. I don't think there's any question that. You've been in radio and television in the Detroit area for a long time.
I've been called a lot of things.
Before we talk about your broadcasting career, which is huge, Kam, I mean, there's so many things to talk about. This is Radio Dayz. So before, and I know you didn't grow up in Detroit, so I'm curious to hear what your answer is on this. You grew up in Arizona. What were you listening to on the radio when you were in your formative years, when you were a teenager growing up? What were you listening to on the radio?
A lot of pop and R&B. A lot of when it became a thing, hip hop, and a lot of just the country.
Yeah,
I wasn't really into the classical, but I really do still like all kinds of music.
Now, most of my listeners won't know any of these names, but were there any personalities that jumped out at you when you were growing up that you dug, or?
There was, as far as local
or
TV
anybody,
radio?
National, Lake, whatever. Who were you? Who were you
yeah.
Like? Yeah.
Well, there was one lady in Phoenix, and she was the first female anchor in Phoenix, and her name was Mary Jo West. So she was my inspiration. But I always loved Tom Brokaw, and I always loved Peter Jennings and Jane Pauley, all of those.
I should have put this at the top. I want to apologize for people tuning in and wanting to see a video of myself and Kam. We once again had technical difficulties, so the show must go on. So this is a podcast, so you're seeing that lovely picture of Kam and the mediocre picture of me there. But yeah, so this is what we had technical difficulties. That's why we're not video streaming, so we apologize. But again, the content in today's show is going to be stellar because this young lady has had an amazing broadcasting career in both television and in radio, which is quite remarkable. But let's get back into it. Kam, when did you know and how did you pursue a career in broadcasting? How did you know you wanted to do that, and talk about that journey from the beginning to your first gig?
I begged my parents for a tape recorder, and they wouldn't get it for me. When they finally did, my neighbor and I across the street used to just play DJ. We'd play our records, and I remember my radio name was Maxie Saxy.
Oh, I love
Even
it.
know where I
love
got that. So I'd say, "This is Maxie Saxy, and you're listening to the sounds of Lou Rawls," and we'd play the record.
You'll never find.
Yes, exactly. Still one of my favorites. And then when I grew up and went to college, I actually majored in interior design. Couldn't quite get the math.
Wow, that's interesting.
So, but then I came up with this idea. I thought, well, I'd like to design sets for soap operas and TV shows. And the interior design professors were like, well, we've never heard that before, but why don't you go see the guy in communications just to see if there's something he can get you into. The guy was amazing, and he's like, have you ever thought of being on the air? And I said, no, have not, other than Maxie Saxy. And he said, I want you to take like a voice class. So he did it. He said, your voice is rich. And of course, it's gotten lower as I've gotten older, but but he said, you have a rich voice. Why don't you try it? So I went into the college, station, and I started to be a DJ, and I really loved it.
Wow.
And then I made the foray into TV just by chance. I was an intern. at the NBC station in Flagstaff, Arizona, which at the time was, market number 206 out of 210.
Right.
It was so small. And I was doing weather, and then I moved up to anchor, and I was paid $5.25 an hour.
Wow. Loaded.
Yep. And I was the highest paid. But that was way back, but then I went to the Weather Channel for a couple of years, and then I came here.
All right, I don't want to jump ahead. I don't want to jump ahead because I do want to ask you, because that's quite an interesting dynamic. You started in radio, and then you were just like, and then I went into TV. That just doesn't happen. Nobody. I mean, so before we get to your TV aspect, when you were doing radio, talk to me about how that transitioned. I mean, how do you go from being, to just starting a radio show to say, did somebody just say, hey, okay, you got a perfect face for TV, or how did that work?
I don't think anyone said that. but even back then, it was like, you couldn't. Yeah, you had to kind of pass, cut the muster with certain looks, I guess. But I took a drama class, and I had a great time in that. And then we kind of were on camera for that. So that's really how it developed. Nobody, really discovered me.
Right.
And that was when I was still in college. But then I got that internship at the TV station, and I started reading fake scripts, just to get a reel put together. But then I liked it. So I wanted to pursue TV way more than radio.
Yeah, it seemed like a natural fit. I mean, you did the 9 for years, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you mentioned a moment ago, in 1989, you got hired as an on-air meteorologist at the Weather Channel. How did that opportunity present itself?
I had a friend who was doing the weather in Flagstaff, and he said, would you like to think about going to the Weather Channel to work? And I was like, no, that's a national station. I've never lived in a different state. And I use magnets on metal mats. How do you think I'm going to do a technical weathercast with knobs and buttons? But he left. He went to the Weather Channel, and then he got me in. And I interviewed, and I thought, there's no way I'm getting this job. And next thing I know, I'm on my way to Atlanta. And that was the first time I went across country. And then I stayed there for about a couple of years. So as they called us on-camera meteorologists, we didn't have degrees.
Right.
Some of us, a lot of them, I think it's required now. But that was a really fun gig. I got to live in, a great city, and it was fun, but everybody was always trying to get out. So it really was kind of a short stint. And I just happened to apply for a weekend weather position, weekday reporter position here. And lo and behold, the news director gave me a job.
Well, I don't want to embarrass you, Kam, but doing research for this podcast, I came across a clip of you giving a national weather forecast. So go ahead and sit through this, if you will. Take a listen.
Let's check on the maps and roll them on into motion, beginning with Sunday morning. Still seeing some rain in store for northern Arizona. Back up into the Great Basin. Two things here. We've got the remnants from what once was Hurricane Boris. That's still coming up from the south. Plus a front is dropping on in from the west, and that's going to be scattering some showers into the Great Basin. And for once, we're looking at a pretty healthy rainfall amount for Southern California over into Arizona. You may get doused with about 3 inches of rain, so that could cause
great adjective right
problems
there.
Here. Across the Southland, a little bit of rain, a little bit of instability in the afternoon, especially as the heating kicks into gear, so the thunderstorms could be in the cards for you again as that front sags southward.
I have to say, as much as I love that clip, because we got to delve into that clip, you're so calm, cool, and collected. But what I remembered watching it, because we're obviously an audio here, but I remembered because it used to drive me crazy back then, because that was from 1990, I believe. But it used to drive me crazy when you guys, whoever was doing the weather report, it would cut you off and then go to a blue screen with your local forecast. I was like, "What's the deal? She's in the middle of a sentence. What was that about?"
We had 5 lights, red lights, and they would count down to when you were supposed to wrap it up. So we'd start to see the lights, and we'd finish, and then sure enough, we'd still get cut off. But we didn't know it in the studio until you went back to an air check. And for some reason, that never got fixed.
Well, this one, if you, and I'll put a link in the description, much to Kam's chagrin, but you will see Kam Carman with brown hair and big shoulder pads of the time. I love the shoulder pads you ladies would. Yes.
And I think I weighed about 90 pounds.
So that had to be pretty cool. I mean, it's one thing to be on radio. It's another thing to be on TV. You, early in your career, National Weather Channel. I mean, how did that, what was that like for you or your family, your friends? That had to be kind of cool.
It was. And my mom would come out and visit. And, you know, in Atlanta, nobody knows you unless you're on a local TV station. Right. So nobody knew. But my mom would always, at restaurants, say, do you know my daughter? She's on the Weather Channel. And of course, everyone said, no, no, I don't know who she is. But that was a really great time. And it was a perfect experience for me. And I was ready to go, but because they don't sign contracts, you can just, well, I don't know about now, but you could just go at your will. And it was so important to me to get to a top 10 market. And I thought, well, now I've got the Weather Channel behind me. I'm,
right.
You know, I'm good to go. And at the time, Detroit was a top 10 market. So I thought that was a major score.
Yeah. So how did, obviously you're from Arizona, you're now in Atlanta, and so you decide that, okay, I'm going to go on and try a top 10 market. How did Detroit present itself? I mean, was there a specific job? Was it Fox 2?
There was. And it was the weekday weather, weekend weather weekday reporter. And I thought, because there were 3-year contracts, I thought, okay, it's going to be cold as you know what. And I thought, I'll get in, I'll serve my sentence, and I'll get out. And I'll get an even better job in a top 5 market.
Right.
And now 30 years later, here I am.
It's crazy. It's crazy because people think you grew up here, but you, in fact, started in Arizona. So let's talk about WJBK, Fox 2. So who was Joe Glover there at the time? Who was the anchors when you got pulled in at 90? I think this is 1991. You started at Fox 2, right?
Yep, that's right. It was Joe Glover and Rich Fisher.
Rich Fisher.
Yeah. They're both passed away now, so it's sad. It's sad. But Bill Bonds came in for a brief stint. Wow. Yeah. It didn't last long.
Right.
But Sherry Margolis, Murray Feldman, we're all still friends today. It was a really great camaraderie early on. And everybody loved their job and it was happy. But then management came in, or management changes occurred. And, you know, things get different. They want younger, prettier, smarter people.
Yeah.
So he kind of, you know, I like to say I've aged out of the system.
I think you're the Demi Moore of television. That's what I think.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
But it's interesting you say that about you kind of had to be attractive for the camera, right?
Yeah.
And was that a thing? Because it's not really a thing now, but it was then, wasn't it?
It is not. And you know, in fact, way back when, and I've told this story before, so it's not like I'm telling secrets that have never been divulged. We had a girl leave. I'm sure you remember her. She was really pretty.
Lucy Nolan.
Yes, very pretty, beautiful girl, smart as all get out. She left, and I was just making the move into news. And my boss came into the weather office, and she, who was a female, said, "Well, Lucy's gone. We need you to be the sexy one now."
Oh my gosh!
And I was flattered.
Right? Yeah, different time.
Yeah, totally different time. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go buy lots of low cut shirts and mini skirts. And I really enjoyed it for a while, you know, for the most part. It was, but again, like now it would be disgusting and someone would get sued if they said that. That boss is no longer there. So it's, you know, it's nothing against that Fox or anything, but that's just the way things were back then.
Now, did you, I feel like I'm digging for dirt here, but did Lucy Nolan leave for a specific reason, or was it controversial?
I think no. She got a job in Houston.
Oh, okay. You talk about being attractive. I'm not going to lie. I had a thing for Lucy Nolan. I tuned in because of Lucy Nolan. I'm not going to lie.
Everybody did. Yeah. Oh, I don't want to. Yeah, everybody had a thing for her. She not only was she beautiful, she was almost a Rhodes Scholar. She was so smart. It was, and we got along for a while, and then things happened. Things happened, but I was sad to see her go. So
yeah, well, they replaced. If we were in 1990, this is what I would say: they replaced a hottie with a hottie.
Oh,
right. So let me ask you that. I don't want to spend too much time on that because again, we'll both probably get canceled for this. How is that different going from weather to like now you're the lead anchor? How was that changed? Was that you said you liked it, but did you feel pressure?
Oh yeah. I mean, complete pressure all day, every day. And I do have a little problem with fumbling my words, and I always did. And I also have issues with people talking in my ear and me trying to speak at the same time. So it was a difficult transition. And then finally, that previous boss that I was mentioning, she came up with this idea of getting the 9 together. And so Jason Carr and Lee Thomas and I were the founding fathers, if you will. I mean, that was many years later. So I did do news for a long time. But this was, as you know, more of a kind of a talk show thing. And I thought, this is it. I have hit my stride. This is the perfect job. And I loved my coworkers. And it went on for a long time. We did well.
Yeah, and it had several different variations. But at the beginning, what was the premise of it? Because it has evolved into what it has become. But at the beginning, what was the premise of what it was supposed to be?
Non-news. It was supposed to be human interest and just, chatter and being the audience who is normally mostly female and stay-at-home moms or workers and working from home. It was supposed to be appealing to them. So we do a lot of cooking segments, and which they still do, and flower arrangements. But we'd have satellite interviews with movie stars, and it was just really fun. So
to that point, do you have some favorites that you've gotten to interview over the years in that position at the 9?
Yeah, and I said some stupid things as well.
We all do. Come on.
I was so thrilled one time to meet Davy Jones. He was coming in.
Oh yeah, the Monkees.
And I had my 33 RPM, and I was so nervous. My lead in to him was, well, you know him as one of the Monkees. Blah 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 blah. Welcome, Davy Jones. It's our dubious distinction to have you on the air. Oh.
Now.
So that was horrible. He handled it well.
I have to ask you this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, because this question is later in my interview, but you brought up Davy Jones, which if we're doing 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, Davy Jones makes me think of the Brady Bunch. I talked to your friend Renee Vitale, of someone who was on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. She told me that you're a huge fan of the Brady Bunch. Now, obviously, because that's something you and I share. I've seen every episode of the Brady Bunch. Davy Jones made a huge infamous appearance, and Marsha, Kam. Did that have anything to do with you being nervous with Davy Jones?
Yes, and by then he was not a household name, but I was so thrilled whenever I'd meet any of those older stars, like Richard Marx. He was in it. I was a mess. And John Waite. I was a mess.
Oh, you got to interview John Waite. I love him.
Yeah. He was such a good guy. He was so nice. But yeah, the Davy Jones thing, I mean, that's who I grew up with. And I was really hoping he wouldn't be a jerk. And he was not. He was a perfect gentleman.
Yeah, that can always go the other way. You never know. I'm sure you've met some people who were like, that guy's a jerk or that girl's a jerk.
Many went the other way. Jamie Foxx, right when he was getting started on Ray, the movie.
Yeah.
He was still relatively an unknown, and he was the biggest jerk.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. That's too bad.
I know. I think he's mellowed out since then, but one surprise was Mickey Rooney, and he was so rude. And
he's the biggest movie star in the world.
I know. Just ask him.
It's that old Don Rickles joke. He's awesome. Just ask him. He'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. But there were a lot. Yeah, there were a lot of nice people.
In addition to interviewing a lot of people, I mean, you spent 23 years at Fox 2. Who were some of the favorite people you rubbed elbows with? You mentioned Jason. You mentioned a couple others. Who did you really enjoy working with over the years? Who were some of your favorites? Because there's been a lot of talent coming in and out of that building.
I know. There have been. I loved working with Jay Towers. He's still there. If you remember, Ron Savage was the weekend anchor.
I loved Ron Savage. I didn't know him, but I was crushed when he passed.
I know, and he was everything he appeared to be. the happiest guy I had ever met, and smart and funny, and would always say, "Hey, top job, top job." There was no bad mood ever for him. So it was great. I loved Al Allen. Remember little Al Allen on the side of the overpass?
Yep.
I loved him. Yeah, there were so many. And I really became better friends with a lot of people behind the scenes than I really had in person, or in front of the camera. So I still keep in touch with a couple of them. They're great.
Here's me looking for some juicy gossip. What is the dynamic like when Jason Carr and Taryn Asher work together? Was that weird having a married couple?
No, it was very professional. Sometimes she would fill in on the 9 and I would sit in the middle. And sometimes they would play and they'd have little snarky comments and I'd be like, okay, I'm the marriage counselor here. You go to your corner. You go to your corner. But it wasn't real. I was just kind of goofing around.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
so
she didn't. I mean, she worked nights, so
yeah, it was a different.
I really never saw her.
Yeah, both very talented. I think they're both great. While still at Fox in '93, you're there on the TV for a couple years. You started another job at 100.3 WNIC. You mentioned Jay Towers.
Yeah.
How did that opportunity come to pass? Because I knew you probably said, "Well, I've done radio. Why not go back into radio now that I'm on TV?" You went. It's kind of an interesting path. But how did that happen?
Right. Jim Harper, my good old buddy, to this day, we talk almost every day. He contacted me and just said, "Would you like to do the weather?" I'm like, I really don't know what you mean. But he said, "We'll put a microphone in your house. You don't have to come in," because it's in Dearborn. It was at the time. And when you're, not working on Fox 2 and you're home, we can just have you on. And it just turned into this kind of like unicorn for me, because it was so fun and I didn't have to do much. Give the weather and then find a topic and goof around. It was really good chemistry, I thought, with the crew that's changed over the years.
So I'm curious about that, because as a journalist, he wanted you to do the weather. Did you did some banter with him, before and after, right?
Yeah.
How did you like that?
Yeah.
Because I mean, was it just Jim or was it Harper and Gannon?
It was Gannon at first, and Stacey DeFord and Linda Lancey, and then Stacey left, and it was Cindy Canty. And we just, it was almost like I would go in and flip the switch, and whatever they were talking about, I could jump in. Later, when I worked at WNIC with Jay Towers, we actually came up with topics that we would talk about, and we have to list our top 5 of what happened this week.
Right.
And we'd pick a couple of them, and everybody would, interact. And radio is so much different from TV. It really, it's just so, like, you can make a face and you're not on camera, or you can do things behind the scenes, as that don't get seen, and maybe make your delivery better because you're not stumbling and nobody's speaking in your ear.
Right.
So,
well, I have several. I have several. But what you and Jay do for different. I mean, it's interesting to me how you can do a morning show and be on the air on a radio station in the morning. How did you do it, and how did Jay do it?
He has a studio built into Fox 2, but before he would get up really early, and he'd go into the station and he'd record some things when they moved to Farmington Hills.
All right.
And then he would go on to Fox 2 and do his job. And then in that studio, he runs between segments. Like if you just see Amy Andrews on for a 5-minute stretch and not Jay, he's down the hall doing his radio. So,
oh yeah. That's busy work right there.
It is. He is a power machine. He's a hard worker.
Yeah, so let me because this is something that I talk about a lot on this podcast, is how radio is, I won't say evolved, devolved may be a word, but I mean, we're talking the early 90s radio at the height of its popularity. Talk about how, from your purview, while you're sitting in that chair at NIC, how you saw it maybe progress at the peak in the 90s before the internet came to be. And could you kind of give my listeners maybe an insight into the dynamic of what radio was like in Detroit in those early 90s?
It was very simple, and that's why I liked it. As I just, you flip on a thing and talk about a few fun things, but you're right, no internet and not a lot of technical equipment either. So you kind of had to fly by the seat of your pants. If your mic broke and you had dead air, that's just what happened. you have to scramble to put some, PSA or something on the air. But it was simple and it was easy. And now it's like, we never had sound effects or anything, behind our bits. They called them breaks, when in TV, a break is when you stop.
Right.
Break in radio is the segment. So it has evolved. And I'd love to get back into it at some point. I know I do work with Jim Harper again on WJR.
But it's different.
That's
a different.
Yeah, it's totally different. Yeah, the studios are ornate. You can't smoke in the studios like what they used to in the old days. It's crazy. And there's a lot of security too. You wouldn't think that you'd need to, have 10 badges to get into the building, but that's just how things are with TV and radio.
I had Jill Forsyth on the show last year, and I asked her we were talking about smoking, and we were talking about who smoked, and she said, I think a better question is who didn't smoke. Everybody smoked. Everybody smoked in the studio. Right.
Yes, and they did. But for some reason, it didn't affect the equipment. I would like to say, for the record, I do not smoke. I have never smoked. So
I think you could. Well, and that's the thing. Obviously, I'm 53 now, and as I get older, and I'm aging with the people that are my age, you can see the people who have smoked. You can tell. You know what I mean? You can tell. And it's obviously, we're talking the 60s where doctors were doing commercials. I smoke Pall Malls and so for a long time. But now everybody knows it's not good for you. But when you smoke and you smoke for a long time, it wears on your body. You can look at somebody, and just like when you see somebody with no teeth and you're like, well, they probably do heroin. But you can tell when somebody smokes, especially I found that women, they get these wrinkles around their mouth.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't hide those,
they're terrible.
So it's a good for you because, especially like I said, everybody smoked. How did you've done enough smoking secondhand? I'm sure.
I grew up with a smoker, so any day I
remember seeing pictures of Dick Kernan teaching Specs Howard class with a cigarette in his hand.
Yeah,
crazy. Now we talked. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, like for radio and TV personalities. I mean, it is stressful being in front of the mic or being in front of the camera. So, a lot of them would just go out, take a smoke break. They'd come in and they'd be relaxed again. And that's the way, many people dealt with the stress.
Now, we were talking about your time at 100.3 WNIC. You were there for quite a while as well. I asked you about all the people that came in and out of the Fox 2 building. Talk about some of the jocks that you got to rub elbows with and work with, because you did more than one show. I mean, you did several variations when you were at NIC. Talk about some of your favorite personalities that came through those halls.
Do you remember Dave Lockhart?
Dave Lockhart, yeah.
Oh, he was great. And I also worked with Gene Maxwell. He was great. Couple people that are still on, Rachel Hunter, who's on YCD. A couple, most of the people are out of radio now, but it was, I got to meet I worked with a lot of different personalities. Some weren't so great and a little tough to get the meat out.
Yeah.
and get responses that you wanted. But most everybody was great. I never worked with any tyrants. I never worked with any, I'm talking radio.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And much like radio and television, you can run into people who, in fact, there's people who I call my friends now. At one time when I worked with them, there was some conflict because, it's some people get paranoid about their jobs, and you start asking questions and they think you're after their job, and it can get, and egos get involved. It can get ugly,
especially in TV. But I don't know if you know this, but our dear friend Renee Vitale did not like me when I first came in.
Come on,
and she hated me. And
really?
She said, later she said to the producer, I don't want this girl messing up our chemistry. Who does she think she is? I'm like, I'm the weather person. I'm not taking your job.
That's funny.
And we just became friends, and she's like, I can't believe I didn't like you.
That's funny. You should have said, I don't like you either, Vitale.
And I did. It's like, why does everybody hate me?
No, I don't think anybody could hate Renee. I don't know.
No.
She's just too full of life. But so did you guys break bread, and that's how you found out about this? Because she probably didn't share with you that she had kind of
Oh, she did. Yeah, she and the producer were like, we didn't like you. We went to Jamaica. It was a radio trip to Jamaica. And, when you're in a plane for 8 hours and you stay in the same hotel and you eat at the same tables, and then Renee's like, I'm so sorry. You're cool.
Of course I am. Of course I'm cool.
Yeah. 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 It's still a great relationship. We have so much fun. We laugh. Yeah. And she knows now that I never even had intended to take her job. I mean, not even close.
Well, how did your job at NIC evolve over those 20 years that you were there?
Well, I did become more of a personality, more of a sidekick, and I would just give the weather. So that was great. And I did have to go to appearances, which I didn't really like because you never knew what creep was going to show up around the corner. Yeah. I think there are a lot more creeps in radio than there are TV.
Yes.
But I think one helped the other. I think radio helped me a lot with TV, especially when we were doing the 9, and TV helped with radio. Just to know what listeners think is funny and what they don't think is funny. And I still had my share of, trip ups.
What's it like being recognized? What was it like being recognized in public? Was that awkward for you? Was that weird? How was that for your family?
I actually liked it. I hate to say that because it sounds so egotistical, but people were mostly really, really nice. And they were like, oh, I really like you on the air. I mean, I had a ton of haters for sure. But even as soon as, or as recently, my daughter had to go in a hospital for a procedure. And one of the nurses was bringing her out of her anesthesia. And she was like, I really liked you on the radio. And my daughter's like, what? Because it's been so long. It's been since 2016 that I was on the radio. She said, I just recognized your voice and you were one of my favorites. And it was really awesome. Cool. But I don't get recognized now. And I actually like it now.
Come on. There's got to be days where like, oh my God, that's Kam Carman. Maybe
no.
You don't know? No?
No.
You were on TV for 20 years. I think you're being modest.
No, I really, and I've gained a lot of weight. I mean, I will be completely transparent about that. My hair is different. Used to be that, straight anchor look. It's completely different. It's a darker color. So people really don't recognize me. If I'm introduced to somebody and they say, this is Kam Carman, and they go, oh, I remember you, but I never get recognized. So it's actually kind of nice.
I asked you what some of your favorite memories were at Fox 2. Who were some of the best interactions with maybe singers or actors that come into the studio at NIC? Who are some of your favorites?
I had a satellite. It wasn't in person, but I loved Garth Brooks. And I hear he can be such a stickler. But we sang rodeo together. Bow, bow. That was a great interview. And Jamie Lee Curtis, fabulous. Got to meet Selena. I do too. Got to meet Selena in person, and she was not great. She had just broken up with the Biebs, and we were instructed, to not bring that up because if we brought it up, she was going to walk out. And she had some issues, some physical health issues too. So she wasn't that great. She wasn't that nice. Lauren Bacall.
She's old. She's an old school broad.
Old school, yeah. She had come into the studio, and somebody handed her a styrofoam cup of coffee. And Fox 2 is notorious for having terrible coffee. And she looked at the stagehand and said, "This place is an asylum."
Wow.
Yeah.
Those old movie stars. Oh.
Yeah, I know. Fergie was great. Princess Fergie, not Fergie, the Black Eyed Peas. She was great. And Dwayne The Rock Johnson, very nice.
These are very surreal experiences where you're rubbing elbows with these national celebrities.
That's right.
Did you ever get starstruck? And if so, with who?
Ooh, yes, I did. And this is so weird. Dennis Leary, who is like the most unlikely. You know who he is?
Yeah, right? He's an asshole. Yeah.
I know. He
became famous with that song, I'm an Asshole, yeah.
Yeah, and he's, there's something really charismatic about him.
He
had
amazing.
A little bit of an eye lock.
Oh, really? A little flirtation going on with Mr. Leary there?
Bit.
Nice.
And also, someone else was odd. It was hard to read him, but Smokey Robinson also had a flirt thing going on.
Well, he's got those eyes that I'm sure women fall apart when he looks at you.
Right.
He's got those
maybe
blue
that was
eyes.
it.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell, but he was like, he would not stop the eye contact. And I'm like, God, this is weird. But it probably was just his eyes.
Did any celebrity come in and make you feel uncomfortable?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, usually they're pretty professional. They're in there to do a job and to promote whatever they're promoting.
There was something odd with Dave Koz, the jazz performer.
Yeah, Dave Koz, yeah.
Yeah, he was in, and he kept asking Alan Lee to fix me up. I want to go out to dinner with her. And I'm like, okay, no, not attracted. And then I went my way, he went his way. And since then, he has come out as gay. So I'm like,
are you serious? What's that about? That's bizarre.
I know. And I hate to say this about a true Michigan performer, but Soupy Sales was also very creepy one time.
Yeah, I've heard some bad things about Soupy Sales. It's too bad. It's too bad.
I know, because he was an icon.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dave Koz, I was flabbergasted. I'm like, what? I guess I have that effect on men. I don't know.
You mentioned Garth Brooks earlier. For my last full-time job in radio was at a station called KMAG in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I was a program director, country station there for a couple years, and I never met him at Garth Brooks, never interviewed him, nothing like that. But he lived in Oklahoma, which was within our listing because we were right at the border of Arkansas and Oklahoma, and so we had T-shirts made up that says, "You listen to Garth Brooks listens to us." And I just thought that was cool because he's another icon. He changed country music.
Absolutely, and I think he's still the most decorated country star of all time. I could be wrong because I heard that a couple of years ago, but he's had more awards apparently than anyone.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary.
Who else was cool was Boy George.
Really?
Super cool.
Say more things. Say more things about that.
Yeah, he was, it was not quite dressed up in his stage makeup, but we just kind of, the group and I just sat around chatting, and it was like, this guy, this was a huge star when I was in college, and he was just really cool. Yeah, super cool. And what's his name? I'll have to think of it. My sister had said, my sister had said, well, here I am. She's a teacher in Arizona. She said, here I am reading books to sixth graders, and you're hanging out with Sugar Ray in the kitchen of Fox 2. Oh, she's like, yeah, what has my life become? That was awesome. Cool. He was a good guy too.
So we were talking before we move on from Fox 2. I want to we kind of double back a little bit. What was the 9? Like that evolved into so many different things, but what do you miss now that you're not doing it? You're a couple years away from that. What do you miss most about doing that show?
I miss Jason and Lee the most. I miss the fun, the laughing, because it wasn't as structured as news, and you could laugh, and if something dumb came up, it was hysterical. And I miss the viewer interaction and the Facebook love, and it was a really, really great time. And I just, it's a shame the way it ended for me. And then eventually Jason and Lee, but things do evolve.
Do you want to share that, or do you want to just bypass that?
Yeah, we can bypass.
Okay. All right. I'm going to cut that question out. Okay. All right. Moving on. Well, before we move on, do you prefer working in television or radio, and why?
Television, definitely. Although it is crazy and it's frenetic and it's breaking news that I didn't normally, adapt to very well. I really liked it. I liked the crew and it's like, if I could do it again, I would. I wouldn't do news. I actually had started a restaurant review show called Dine and Dish Nation, and I had a great couple of people working with me, and we would go around to different restaurants, and we'd get real guests to come on, and they'd get to go to these 3 different restaurants and then just talk about them, and that's what I love to do. That was my passion, not breaking news and And I couldn't do that anymore. I was young once, and I'm too old for that nonsense now.
Before we move on from Fox, one of the big stories, I mean, it made headlines. And I think I told you before, I kind of feel a kinship to you because I've had a stalker break into my house when I was doing a morning show in Benton Harbor. But I want to ask you, as a result of an unstable individual, it was a pretty big story when it happened. How scary was it? And could you talk about your stalker situation while you were at Fox 2?
Sure. I just started getting these weird calls because back then, we had voicemail, but it was like a regular answering machine. And this guy started calling, and it wasn't too weird at first, but then he started saying things like, I don't like birds. My sister had a bird and it died. And then he would call, so bizarre. Then he would call the next time and start screaming at me, saying, you told me through the television that we were going to meet on a date.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even pay attention to it because honestly, in that business, you kind of become immune because there are always going to be stalkers and weirdos. And the messages started getting stranger and stranger. And then one day it was like morning and I was about to finish my shift. And he called and said, I'm coming to get you. And we're going to go to Ohio and we're going to get married. And I'm on my way. And we did not have security at Fox 2 at that point. We did not have the gate that rises up when you clear it through the security officer.
Right.
So I told my boss, and he's like, okay, this is it. We're finally moving in after months and months of this guy calling. And he was parked in a parking lot, in a hotel parking lot across the street. And the police came and got him. And he said, I'm not no stalker. And they opened his trunk and it was like tools. It was like a screwdriver or something. So it wasn't like he was going to use it as a weapon. But then they put him in the paddy wagon and he was talking to himself and it was so scary. So then I did a series on it, of course, to capitalize on it because stalking wasn't really that well known then. But he stopped. The thing was that he would get a mental evaluation after a year. And for a long time, they called me and would say, he's still in, he's not mentally sound to come out of this mental facility yet. So I was like, okay, great. And then, the rules changed as far as HIPAA and they couldn't tell me anymore. I was like looking over my shoulder all the time.
Yeah.
I had even gotten married and I thought, what if he's in one of the pews? What if he's waiting there?
Yeah.
To see me walk down the aisle and he comes out with a machete or something.
Yeah, there's people unstable out there. And it's not Rebecca Schaefer, that actress that was in Poltergeist. I mean, all it takes is an unhinged fan or quote unquote fan or somebody who's infatuated with you. And like you said, he thought you were giving him messages while you were on the TV. That's just insane. That can't have. So were you scared? I mean, how did your family react to that? That had to be a scary moment.
It was really weird. I wasn't scared. I just thought that day I was just like, well, this is a little off what's been happening. But I would get those dumb phone messages and I'd save them. But, I wasn't really scared. I don't know why. And then when I was getting married, my now ex-husband wasn't really scared either. And the night the guy got picked up, or the day the guy got picked up, I had to they assigned a bodyguard to me. And that was interesting because he had to stay up all night just in case this guy got out of jail or whatever. And I was like, do you want some pizza? No, ma'am, I can't eat on the job. I can't sleep on the job. So it was weird. But
it wasn't Kevin Costner, was it? Just
I wish. It was just a weird time. But I think every anchor at some point has had a weirdo or a stalker or some kind of weird interaction with somebody, either at a personal appearance or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's
bizarre. Yeah. I'm just thankful when my situation happened that my wife and kid wasn't at home at the time.
Right.
You never know what somebody's capable of. Anyway.
I know.
In 2017, you got hired as the host and executive producer for a show called Dine and Dish Nation. Tell me about this.
Yep, that was my restaurant review show. I was the executive producer. I patterned it after a show that was in Chicago and a couple other markets. And that was when I would pick people. They would write in and say why they'd be a good food critic, or they were foodies. And we had a whole great thing going. And we had a couple seasons on PBS. Then the money dried up. I tried to get sponsors, and then pandemic happened. So, and all the restaurants shut down. So I couldn't. It was like a double whammy. We just couldn't. We couldn't do it. I'd still love to do that again, because now with the resurgence of the restaurants in Detroit and everywhere else, and the pandemic is, hopefully behind us.
Yeah.
It was getting funding for it was the main issue at first, and then the pandemic.
Yeah, I think COVID, the pandemic, really fizzled a lot of different projects and plans. It put them to the wayside. In March of last year, you became vice president of media relations for West Shore. Talk about that.
Yeah, I had been looking for something in the PR world, and it just kind of happened. I was looking and applying for things, and then I just saw on a job board, my now boss, who is the best boss in the world, by the way, he posted something like, "I need a part-time writer." And I was like, I don't really have much going on. So I met with him, and he was like, "You know what? I have other ideas." And then just, with the flip of a switch, I became the vice president of the company.
Wow. And
it's been great. And a lot of people who get out of TV go into PR. I did think it would be a natural fit. I have had a few difficulties. So, instead of getting the press release, I'm writing the press release, and I write for TV. So it's like, if I put an in there or a ... it's completely different. So it's been a learning curve, but it's been a year.
It's funny about broadcasting. Like I write in broadcast style, even on my emails. So it's capital letters and ... And they're like, "Do you write like a normal person?" I was like, "This is how you write in broadcast style. I don't know what to tell you."
Exactly.
I've never stopped. He goes, "Stop yelling at me." I'm not yelling. I want to be able to read it.
That's it. It's hard to get out of.
Also, last couple of years, you've been reunited with your good friend, Mr. Jim Harper, at WJR. As a WJR alum, I have to tell you, very cool walking into that Fisher building every day. I mean, every weekend, right?
It is beautiful, and it's quiet. So I go in on Saturday mornings, and there's nobody in there except the security guard, and it's so beautiful. And the studios are state of the art. They're
they just renovated them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just the two of us. It was Steve Courtney for a while, but he went on to do other sports things, more sports oriented, and producer Dave, and it's just the three of us, just kind of yakking it up.
Dave Rieger, I love Dave Rieger.
Yeah, Dave Rieger. Yeah, he's awesome. He's the best producer.
Him and he does that podcast, whatever Dave, I think, with the engineer at JR. Yeah, there's some great people over there. Joe Gannon, Don Schuster's over there. But talk about how you're doing what talk about you and Jim's show on the weekends at JR, because so many people who used to listen to the radio maybe not listening to the radio anymore. What are you guys doing over there at JR on the weekends now? What kind of show you working on?
Right. It's from 8 to 10 Saturday mornings. It's just a light little kind of, this is what's going on in Michigan kind of thing. We did one bit where it was, you're an old Detroiter if you remember blah, blah, blah. Because a lot of the listeners in that demographic are somewhat older, and they were previously listeners of Jim when he was at WNIC. So, and then we just pick a couple topics. We talk about, the fair in Armada, or
cool.
And we have guests on that are usually, with like the Red Cross, or they usually have something to offer as far as like an event coming up, or this is a fundraiser for whoever. So it's just really, there are no politics. There's no backbiting. There's no competition. It's great. It's easy.
So is it better this time around, or did you like it better when you guys were working at NIC?
Well, I do. I still really love him, and I think we have great chemistry. And the other, players on the team were awesome too, because we could all banter with each other. But I do like this better because It's more one-on-one with Jim, and we're really such good friends. And his wife Lynn is just an amazing human being. And it's different because a lot of the times I wasn't in the studio with them the first time. Right. So it's great.
Well, I see on my question list, this is the portion where I was going to ask you, I was letting it out of the bag that Renee told me that you were a big Brady Bunch fan. So I'll take this moment to ask you another Brady Bunch question. What is your favorite episode from one, Brady Bunch nerd to another? What is your favorite episode of all time for the Brady Bunch and why?
Yeah. There were so many. Oh, gosh, I don't know. I think aside from my very favorite is when Jan had to get glasses. And she was so self-conscious about it. And, she didn't want to wear them and she'd take them off. And then they got a family portrait taken for the parents' anniversary. And she didn't have her glasses on. Well, then she wrecked the portrait because she didn't have her glasses on her bike. And then so they went to take another picture and she had her glasses on. And yeah, it was just like a lesson in, vanity, and she knew what she had to do. But they're all, they had a lesson in each of them.
As much as I love the Vincent Price episode where they went to Hawaii, I still to this day, more than any other episode, is the one where they had the boys versus the girls House of Cards game to see who got to go get the prize at the store. Do you remember that?
That's right. Yeah, and then
the dog knocked down the cards or something.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Tiger. And then they all went in together and got a TV for the whole family.
And they all lived happily ever after. Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that.
Oh, I love that show.
Kam, before we wrap, it's a common question I ask all my guests, and it's an interesting. I'm looking forward to your perspective because you are one of the few that are still currently working in radio today. But I want to ask you, in your opinion, what is the state of radio in 2023?
No, I keep hearing that radio is dead. Radio is dead, but I don't see it. I think it's still, even with WNIC, they still have their avid listeners. And I think now that, like you, putting in podcasts, video podcasts, I think that's the wave, and I think it'll keep up.
It's still in our car. It's still in our car too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's never not
exactly.
going to be in our car.
I agree.
A couple years ago, Art Vola, I was talking to him, and he pointed out that not many people have radios in their home anymore. And since then, I've asked my wife for the last 4 years for a radio. So I have 4 radios now. And every year I'm going to continue to ask for a different radio because it's true. Like, remember, radio used to be on the countertop of every kitchen. And now it's a small television, if maybe a computer. But radio will never die because I'm a firm believer it is, as long as it's live and local, you will always have a listener. You will always have listeners. You know what I mean?
And now we have Alexa. Yeah, you don't need to have a radio on the counter. You can have Alexa on the counter. You can say, Alexa, play WJR, and they play it. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
cool.
It's awesome. Mm-hmm.
What's next for Kam Carman?
Well, I really love my PR job. I really do, and I'm hoping to just grow with this company with West Shore PR. And I don't have a 10-year plan. Things were. It's almost like flying by the seat of your pants for so long. It's like, I just want to settle into this. My kids are 21 now. They're about to be 22. I know. So seeing them grow as well and getting out of that horrible teenage stage has been wonderful. And we'll see if I have grandkids someday. If either one of them wants to settle down, that would be great too.
What do they think about mom being a TV and a radio star? What did they give you? Like, did they ever give you grief, or do they ever wow? They ever look at you in awe? I mean, what's that like?
They don't. They don't even think of me as a star.
I get no respect at home. No respect, I tell you. No respect.
Exactly, Rodney. My son was all giddy though a couple weeks ago. He said, "Mom, you're never going to believe. Somebody talked about the news. I was in the store. Somebody talked about the news, and I just happened to turn around and say, 'Oh, do you know Kam Carman?' And the lady was like, 'Oh my God, yeah.' So my son put me on the phone with her.
Oh my gosh!
Please don't do that.
That's hilarious.
Don't ever do that again.
Do that. That's funny.
No, I mean, he meant it was harmless, but he was a little. He was pretty happy about it.
Kam, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your broadcast story. You've been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Kam Carman, and thank you for checking out Radio Dayz the Podcast. Today's show was brought to you by Team 71 Mortgage Group. Are you looking to buy or refinance your home and have questions that need answers now? Call Brian Allure, 810-444-6466. That's 810-444-6466. Today's show is produced by Ron Robinson Studios. If you need professional marketing videos, professional photography, headshots, maybe you need drone video or photography, head over to ronrobinsonstudios.com, where you can also hear previous episodes of Radio Dayz the Podcast there as well. And if you'd like to learn more about the upcoming documentary about the history of radio, Radio Dayz 101 Years of Radio, click on the Radio Dayz the Movie icon under the Documentaries tab at ronrobinsonstudios.com. Thanks for checking out the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time.
You can't go. All the plants are going to die.